Bill, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. Well, my name is Bill Nyman. I work at Prairie Bible College here in Three Hills, Alberta, Canada, and I teach apologetics and theology and research as well. That's what I do.
Cool. I am an atheist, by which I mean I believe that all of the different evidences we see of the world around us can be best explained by naturalism or physicalism. Could you
Mhm.
tell me some of the reasons you believe there are for belief in a God? Christianity specifically, or in general, is fine with me.
Yeah, I think if we say I believe in God or I'm a Christian, I take a holistic approach where all of reality shows me that God does exist and um, and that we see reflects the divine. So that's and I think the Christian worldview is the most coherent and the most consistent, in my opinion. So that's the reason for why I believe that God exists.
Okay, could you give me some like specific examples of something you think indicates a God more so than just naturalism?
For instance, nature itself, morality is to me is the big one. Um, why do we do the things we do? When we contemplate the three questions of where do I come from, what is my purpose here in life, and where am I going? Um, I think Christianity answers those questions well. Um, and so those are the more obvious evidences for me. Yes.
Well, could you lay out for me how any one of those, a Christianity is a better explanation than naturalism for any question that we have?
Mm. Now, of course, um, and so obviously, I look at nature differently than, for instance, a naturalist. For a naturalist, it just came into being randomly. For me, there is a mind and a divine mind behind all that. I do the things I do, why I make the decisions I make, and why humanity make the decisions they make is a reflection of a divine lawgiver. I believe in objective truth. I believe in objective, and I think if one would be honest with himself, I think 99% of the people believe that there are objective truths and that there is objective morality out there. Um, so that's to me is speaks a lot more to me than, for instance, naturalism. Naturalism doesn't give me the answers that I'm looking for in life. Um, so Christianity does.
I'm not sure how that's evident. So, for example, naturalism can make up answers to any question, just like theism can. The fact that a worldview makes up an answer doesn't mean it's actually giving you the answer. It just means it's making one up. And so, what you would need is some kind of evidence that indicates this answer is more likely to be true than this other answer. So, for example, all the things you
Mhm.
mentioned, I believe in objective truth. I believe in objective morality and purpose and meaning. And I
Mm.
can posit an afterlife and naturalism without a God. And I can say that all of those things are equally or better explained by naturalism than by theism. So even though I don't believe there's an afterlife. I'm purely I
Mm.
think we die and we go to nothingness. But just like
Sure.
Christianity says there is a heaven, there could also be a heaven under naturalism, and the probability of a heaven under naturalism is exactly the same or higher than under theism. So I don't see
Mhm.
any reason to believe the theistic answers
Mm.
are any more or any less made up than the same answers that could be provided under a naturalist hypothesis.
Right now. if I just kind of, before I get back into that, if I can ask you a question, for instance, because you do this all the time, you talk to Christians, and so you've heard all the arguments for Christianity, I'm sure, and you've responded to these well. But I'm just kind of wondering, in your opinion, um, what would be a good argument for the existence of God? Or do you believe there is no argument at all?
Well, I would use novel testable predictions. So if you wanted to say evidence of any new ontology, new existence of something that hasn't been demonstrated, you would need to be able to differentiate imagination from reality. That's really the criterion that all epistemology uses to count something as evidence, is can this differentiate imagination from reality? And I think the best way to do that is novel testable predictions. So if you can predict something in the world that we don't know yet accurately, reliably, multiple times, based on your hypothesis, and get it correct, then that is good evidence of your hypothesis. So, for example, if we died and went to heaven, that'd be evidence of Christianity.
Of course.
If you prayed to God for a gold brick and a gold brick appeared in front of you, that would be evidence. If you said uh, this guy's going to die and rise in 3 days, and he rises in 3 days, that would be good evidence. If the predictions and revelations come true, and like some percentage of the world's population just disappears and their clothes falls to the ground, that would be good evidence. Like any
Mm,
predictions about the future that can be confirmed is the metric to establish the truth of a claim.
mhm. So what keeps you from turning to Christianity? Just because you can't find those kind of evidences?
As far as I know, there is none. As
Mm,
far as I know, the evidence for Christianity is equivalent to the evidence of leprechauns or unicorns or Santa Claus. I don't think that any of the arguments or proposed evidence work because they can't differentiate imagination from reality. All the things that Christians use are fundamentally fallacious in some way. Usually the most common ones: confirmation bias, appeal to authority, appeal to consensus, personal experience, all the things we know don't work. The things in science we're like, yeah, those are bad explanations. We don't use those in science because we know they're fail. And so the reasons Christians provide are unable to differentiate imagination from reality, just like the reasons people have for believing in leprechauns are also unable to
mm.
differentiate imagination from reality.
So like that's from a lot of atheists, of course. But what surprises me from a lot of atheists that they're really interested in Christianity or God, right? And I wonder why that is.
Because
Uh,
Christians
For
have
instance,
influence in society.
if it's equal to leprechauns or unicorns or whatever, I wouldn't waste my time finding out if they would really exist.
Well, if there was a
So,
group of people who worshipped leprechauns who were persecuting you and trying to pass laws based on the magical rainbow and the pot of gold at the end of the magical rainbow, we would be equally as interested in the leprechaun belief as we would be in Christianity.
well, of course, those are fringe groups. They've always been around, fringe groups. So as far as that goes, yeah, you always have those. But I don't believe that's the same thing as Christians, of course. Um,
Well, I mean, the Supreme Court is currently run by very right-leaning religious groups who are passing religious doctrines who are clearly against the Constitution. I think that's a big issue. If that was happening for a leprechaun ideology, I think there would be equally as much hate for the leprechaun ideology.
sure, sure, but um, okay. To me, it's like, yeah. Uh, why are you interested in Christianity? What are you after?
There's a lot of people who believe in this, which I think is a fairy tale, and use that as a justification to pass laws, to hold bigotry against people, to manipulate people into doing things that they shouldn't be doing, to be very immoral. So the fact that this ideology is so pervasive in society, and a lot of people believe it, is a good reason to try to look at this ideology and see if we can find ways that it's irrational, so we can get people to stop doing those things.
Well, are you from the States?
Yes.
Okay, okay, okay. So that's it's a little different, of course, in Canada. I mean, there are people who abuse Christianity, do a lot of things that they shouldn't be doing in the name of Christianity, and I can't deny that. That's been like that for the past 2,000 years. But what is is that the norm, or is that um,
Yeah, it's a minority.
is it an abuse of a certain belief system? And I think it's an abuse of a certain belief system. If you look at it, it's not what Jesus taught. It is not what Christianity taught. Um, so to me, you can't judge Christ by the abuses of religion.
Well, I agree, but those are like two separate questions. One is like, why are atheists interested in Christianity? That's the reason. That's the reason they're interested. But using that as that's not an argument against Christianity. Um, but that is the reason we're interested in looking at Christianity and then have arguments against Christianity. And so I agree that we can't use that as an argument against Christianity intrinsically, but that's not normally what it is. That's just why we're interested in the topic. It's why we look for arguments.
Mhm. Okay. So and you've been looking for a while, and you never found anything that was uh, to look further into Christianity, whether that's the truth. Um, Go to the primary sources and whatever to see if Christianity is really true.
Well, I've looked at all the sources I've been given. I've researched this
Mhm.
in every field I can research.
Mhm. Okay, and nothing really captivated you to take it seriously, obviously, right?
Well, I think it's more that I can objectively show that the evidence provided should not be taken seriously. That would be more my position.
Mhm. Mhm. Right. Okay. Well, that's not, of course, that's not my position. And I don't know if I can't convince you that Christianity is true, right? Of course not. I can't. Anything I say probably will not help you actually looking deeper into Christianity, see if it's really true. Um, all you're after is basically trying to debunk Christianity on the basis of for political reasons or whatever. All right. So, and
Well,
that's too bad.
I'd say my goal is if you could provide a piece of evidence that wasn't demonstrably false or demonstrably fallacious, that would be the goal of these conversations.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm not the first one that talks to you as a Christian, I'm sure. Um, so I don't know if I can give you uh, the golden nugget, so to speak. I can tell you why I'm a Christian, why I believe Christianity is true, um, and you can tell me why you believe Christianity is not true. But that's that's where it stops. I think that's where we are at a stalemate. And so um, a apologetics is not so much a debate and going at, you know I give you a piece of evidence, I give you a piece of counter evidence, and we go on and on and on. I believe that it's saying, okay, this is why I believe Christianity to be true, um, and look deeper into Christianity, read the Bible, um, and see what Christianity actually teaches, and not on the basis of, for instance, a political party or a fringe group, because we can always find fault there. But you can't judge Christianity by that. I can't give you, okay, if that were true, there be no atheists, right? If I can say my piece of evidence and you can't deny that piece of evidence, now you must believe because it is so overwhelming, right? That I can't give you that, and I don't think anybody can give you that. Christianity is a journey. You look at every aspect of life and see, okay, can I answer the questions that I have in life? Can I answer them satisfactorily through naturalism or Buddhism or whatever? Where do we come from? What is my purpose in life? Everybody has those questions. Everybody needs to answer those questions. Can you answer this question as a naturalist?
Sure, I can make up answers. But the question is why would your answers be less likely to be made up than my answers that I make up? So that's what I'm interested in is, do you have any evidence? Do we have any reason to believe Christianity is more than just a fairy tale, more than just leprechauns or Harry Potter? And so my question is do you have evidence? Do we have any reason to take Christianity more seriously than we do leprechauns? I do not think we do. I think that all of the arguments, all of the evidence is demonstrably equivalent for leprechauns, essentially. And so I think that we should not believe the answers Christianity provides, just like we should not believe the answers Harry Potter provides, because it's a fiction. And I think that the answers that naturalism provides, naturalism is the best worldview, I think, that most likely corresponds to reality as we have, because it has the most evidence, in which case we have the most reason to believe the answers naturalism provides, and we don't have any reason to believe the answers Christianity provides. And I think it's possible to provide evidence for ideologies. I don't, this isn't like a stalemate. I can say the cosmic microwave background radiation is 13.8 billion years old, and we can look at it and look at the redshift and we can measure it, and here's the testable predictions, and here's how you measure it, and here's the papers that confirm that. And then you can look like, oh look, yes, that's evidence. That's real evidence. You can really provide real evidence for this. Now, you may not accept it, that's fine, but it's real evidence. It's objectively evidence. But if I say something like, I had a personal experience of a leprechaun, like that's not evidence. That is zero evidence. And so my question is there are some ideologies that are of the kind that can provide real evidence, like naturalism, and there are some ideologies that cannot provide real evidence, like leprechauns. And I want to know, which one is Christianity? Is it more like the leprechauns, or is it more like the science?
Okay, and to me is like, okay, creation itself to me is just like you say. It's, you can give you answers. Are those? Can you account for everything in creation? Can you account for that through naturalistic lenses, or
Yes.
even well, you, of course, through evolution, random chance, and so forth and so. And to me, that's not good evidence. To me, it's like a randomness that comes from evolution itself, naturalistic evolution. So, in other words, it's not that Christians naturalistic evolution. The randomness doesn't account for order, doesn't account for our minds, doesn't account for even ordered thoughts, ordered speech, and so forth. So the question satisfactory is
Okay, so the question here would be is like, what is the explanation of the origins of life or our minds or something along those lines?
sure.
And if we have two hypotheses, one is that naturalistic evolution and the other one is intelligent design. One of these hypotheses is able to predict things about the future. It's going to predict that if evolution is true, we would expect to see a transitional fossil between a lizard and a fish at this exact strata in this exact location. And then we go look, we dig in that location, we find it. It's called Tiktaalik. That is something we predicted before we knew it was there. We said, if evolution is true, here's what we would expect to see. We looked and then we found it. If evolution is true, we'd expect to see endogenous retrovirus markers in DNA that can show the lineage and relationships between different species across a large spectrum, and then we can use that to triangulate lineages. And we find that is something that is very, very successfully predicted. Intelligent design does not expect those things. You don't predict those things under intelligent design. Nobody in the ID community was like, oh, we'd expect ERVs to be shared among lineages in this order, to which would map onto what the apparent design would be. Nobody predicted that. And so one of these hypotheses is accurately able to predict things that we see in reality before we find them, and one of them isn't. So I think one of them has real evidence. One of them is like, yeah, this ERVs, the predictions made by evolution, these explain the data and they have real evidence. Now, it may be hard to understand or hard to believe, but because that hypothesis accurately tells us things about reality, it is the more rational one to believe because it has real evidence, whereas intelligent design does not seem to have real evidence. It has never been able to make testable predictions or confirm things that we don't know yet about reality. The intelligent design argument seems to be like, this is just really, really hard for us to grasp in our brains, therefore it must be a mind, or something like that, an argument from ignorance. And so why would you think that the naturalistic explanations that make successful predictions, tens of thousands of them, and get confirmed every year, why is that a worse explanation than intelligent design?
Well, the thing is, of course, that everything that you just said about fossils, etc., has nothing really to do with Christianity per se. Because the thing is that even in the Christian worldview, one could hold to an evolutionary process. It is just not a random process. It is just a guided process, right? So it's not an either or. It's just not, okay, all Christians are, or they must be, and fill in the blanks, and then kind of like poo-poo that viewpoint, and then say, well, look what we have in the evolutionary process. What we can find.
Sorry to interrupt. I totally agree. I agree, but I didn't say anything about Christianity there. My question is like, if we're thinking about the origin of life and the origin of consciousness, and we have creationism versus abiogenesis, or evolution versus intelligent design of any god, I don't care who it is. Both of these are hypotheses, and one of these hypotheses is able to make confirmed predictions successfully. It doesn't matter what they are. I don't care what they are. And then makes thousands of them, thousands and thousands of them. The other one, the other alternative, makes zero confirmed testable predictions that have ever been verified by this hypothesis. There are tens of thousands that have been made by this hypothesis. Why should we reject the hypothesis that makes tens of thousands of successful predictions and accept the one that makes zero?
Well, because I think you're creating a false dichotomy, though, in saying that the view that you have of evolution stands in contrast to intelligent design, so to speak. Right? I don't think we can make that dichotomy. In intelligent design, it is not. It just randomly. That's all. But evolution and creationism to me is not a very strong argument anyway, because we can talk till the cows come home about this, and I say that evolution was a guided process, divine mind, and you say it wasn't. Okay, and then we're done, right?
I don't think so. So my process of reasoning here is that, like, if we see a cup fall over, and I think the cup fell over because of a squirrel, and you think the cup fell over because of a spirit or something, and I say, if the cup fell over because of a squirrel, I would expect to see squirrel droppings around the cup. And we go look and we find the squirrel droppings. That's evidence of my hypothesis. I got this one right. Now, you could explain the squirrel droppings. You could say, well, no, a squirrel came before and left the droppings, so that's not evidence against my hypothesis. Maybe the spirit went into the squirrel and made it go knock over the cup. You can make your hypothesis fit the data, but it's not evidence of your hypothesis. It's only evidence of my hypothesis because I was able to predict it before we knew it. And so in the case of evolution and the origin of the mind and life, the squirrel is all of the ERVs, the fossil record, the genetic patterns we see, like all of those are evidence of the squirrel. And the fact that it's not conflicting with intelligent design doesn't matter. Like obviously you can make that fit intelligent design, just like you can say the squirrel was infected by the spirit to make it knock over the cup or something. But the spirit hypothesis didn't predict the squirrel droppings. It wasn't like, oh, I expect to see squirrel droppings. It didn't know that. The one who did was the squirrel. The guy who said it's a squirrel predicted that. And so so that hypothesis is the one that has more evidence here. And so the same thing applies to evolution. Even though you can make it fit your hypothesis of intelligent design, the one that was able to predict it before we knew was the abiogenesis, the evolution, the naturalist hypothesis. We were like, we expect to see ERVs, we expect to see fossil records, we expect to see these patterns, and we found them, which is why it's evidence of this hypothesis and not intelligent design, because intelligent design didn't predict these things, it post hoc made them fit their hypothesis.
But we can talk like that both ways. I mean, I can say the cup fell over. Naturalism made the cup fall over and you didn't have a squirrel. Whereas in theism and Christianity, we have the cup fell over and there was a squirrel, and there was a definite someone who pushed that cup over, and we can see squirrel droppings all over. It is just. In naturalism, you are missing that squirrel, or you're missing that divine being who pushed that cup over. So that goes both ways, right?
I don't understand how there, because in this case, the squirrel is Tiktaalik, Archaeopteryx, the ERVs, all the different evidence in science was predicted by naturalists, not by intelligent design. Intelligent design has made no predictions, has never predicted the squirrel. The only people who have ever predicted the squirrel was natural scientists. They predicted the ERVs, they predicted the fossil record, they predicted the double hinged jaw joint that we found in rodents from evolutionary hypothesis. They predicted the transitional fossils between ants and wasps. They predicted all of the predictions was all naturalism. So I agree that if you had successful testable predictions in intelligent design, that would be evidence, but I don't know of any. I've never seen any evidence on that hypothesis whatsoever. Whereas I've seen tons and tons of squirrel predictions that got right under the naturalist hypothesis.
Yeah, I still, to me, it's like I can say, okay, everything is created by divine mind, and you say nothing is created by divine mind. It just happened randomly, and we can keep going back and forth, but that really doesn't help, does it? Because it really doesn't convince any of us whether you're right or I'm right. The fact that I believe that a divine mind guided the evolutionary process, and you believe or you don't believe that a divine mind guided the evolutionary process, and it just happened randomly. And we can talk for a few hours back and forth, but that really doesn't get us anywhere. Because
I'm not quite following. So I agree that you can start with any hypothesis you want. You can start with the God hypothesis, perfectly fine, and I can start with the non-God hypothesis. But what matters is what happens next. If I start with a non-God hypothesis and I predict something and I get it right, that's evidence. Mine is now better. Mine is a better hypothesis. Mine wins, yours loses. The fact that you can explain it and say, well, I can make my God hypothesis explain that data after it's been discovered doesn't matter. It's not evidence. And so what I care about is after we start with the hypothesis is which one can make predictions about the future, about things in reality we didn't know yet, and get it right. And the only one I've seen do that is the naturalists. The fact that evolution has predicted patterns in ERVs that can map onto exactly the genetic relation between humans that we can measure and long distance animals from the past that we can't measure. and gets it right means that they have evidence. And the fact that intelligent design has made no predictions means they have no evidence. And so I'm totally fine with you starting with the God hypothesis.
Mhm.
But the part I'm missing is when you start with that hypothesis, what predictions can you make that have been confirmed to be something we didn't know about the universe yet and been shown to be correct? Because I have lots of those, like lots and lots and lots of those on my hypothesis. And I don't see any of those on your hypothesis. And therefore, I think it's only rational. The only rational thing you could do is believe the naturalist hypothesis because it's the only one that's made predictions that got shown to be correct.
Well, okay. Well, the thing is, of course, that um, creation or the evolutionary process is guided by divine mind. It's not the only thing, of course, uh, that we take. Um, there are many more. All of reality shows us, and that there is a divine being, that there is a divine mind guiding us, and the thing is, what I get though is or what I don't get is um, what would convince you that Christianity is true, because you can't convince me that naturalism is the true worldview, is a satisfactory worldview. Um, so what what are you looking for?
Evidence.
And there is so much out there, but you don't see it, of course, because you closed yourself off to the possibility of even a divine mind existing.
Well, no, I haven't. So that's the part that I can prove is false. Like I'm pretty sure you've closed yourself off to there not being one because you reject the evidence, but I accept all of the evidence. I can just prove that your evidence is false. I can literally prove it. So when I brought up, for example, ERVs, the naturalist said evolution happened, not design, evolution. And because evolution happened, we would expect to see an endogenous retrovirus is a virus that injects its DNA into a reproductive cell, and the reproductive cell then divides, and that little tiny bit of DNA is in all of the kids, all of the offspring of whichever reproductive cell it was introduced to, but it's not going to be in any of the parents, grandparents, great grandparents. And we can see there's tens of thousands of these endogenous retroviruses, and we can see the patterns in these. We can know that you and your kids will have ERVs that your grandparents don't, and your grandparents will have some that your great grandparents don't. And so we can follow this pattern back, and we can see that we can look across species with bats and elephants, and we see, oh, look, there's an ERV pattern at this point that they share. And we can infer from that that they have a common ancestor because they have they share this 10,000 ERVs and they don't share this 10,000. We can identify exactly where that common ancestor is across the genetic spectrum. And we can do this with every single species. We can use ERVs to map every single species and essentially map out where they are in the evolutionary tree to say that they all came from one common ancestor, some kind of prebiotic soup germ stuff. Now, this was predicted by the naturalist hypothesis. And they got it right. They got it so right. They got it tens of thousands of pieces of evidence right, that this is not something that you can just be like, oh, well, that's fine. You either have to reject the evidence and say, no, I'm going to reject all of the evidence we found and just deny it. Or you have to accept it and be like, yeah, that's a good hypothesis. That's evidence of yours. You win. You have better evidence here. And those are your two options. And
Where
from my perspective, I don't see you don't have an example like this. You don't have an example of like endogenous retroviruses that are like, I have to be like, I'm just going to deny the evidence to avoid God. Because I don't think you have any evidence. Like what evidence do you have that I have to reject that is as strong as endogenous retroviruses to show a single common ancestor?
even if you, but you're saying it yourself, you look at patterns, and
Yeah.
where do those patterns then come from in a naturalistic world, right? Because naturalism doesn't give us order, doesn't give us patterns, because everything is seemingly random. And so I'm just kind of wondering where you get the patterns from, if you're a naturalist.
The laws of nature.
Okay, to me, it's like, who put those laws of nature in place then?
Nobody. They're uncreated.
And see, so they pop into being. So you know, um,
Well, I don't think they popped into being. I think that quantum fields have always existed. They're uncreated, and the quantum fields have a nature to it, and that nature determines the laws of physics. So
yeah.
I don't think anything popped into existence. I think quantum fields have always existed. They're the fundamental nature of reality, and they don't have a mind.
And to me, it's like you contribute intelligence to something to put that in place, right?
I don't think it was ever put in place. I think it's eternal. It was never created. It was never put in place. It's always been there.
See, that's like, still, that doesn't, um, that to me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Um, what is eternal? Eternal? It wasn't. We know that by now.
Our universe isn't eternal, but pretty much everybody in physics thinks there was a natural thing before our universe, which is quantum fields. Like there's multiple different theories, like string theory, many worlds hypothesis, to Bohr one pilot wave theory. But we all agree that quantum fields existed prior to space-time. So
That,
space-time emerges from quantum fields.
but but it must come from somewhere. It just
No, why?
didn't nothing. Everything that exists have to have some explanation for its existence.
Who do you think created God?
Yeah. That's, of course, we can, again. That's one of those arguments. We can go ad infinitum, argue that one, but that's something. Someone have started the process and put things in place.
So you don't think God was created. You think God was an uncreated thing, right?
Yeah.
So I think quantum fields are an uncreated thing, just like you think God is an uncreated thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I don't buy that, because something needs to have started this process into being. Um,
The quantum fields are the thing that did that.
I don't buy it, but
Well, but my question would be is why would that explanation not be better than Christianity? Because in the case of quantum fields, we have evidence. We have real evidence that you have to reject. Whereas in the case of Christianity, it seems you have no evidence. So I don't have to reject any evidence. Like in quantum fields are, let's take the multiverse hypothesis. The
Mhm.
multiverse hypothesis is a combination of two things: Guth's early universe inflation and energy states in empty space. And both of these have been confirmed. We've demonstrated both of these exist. Guth's early universe inflation was confirmed with observations of the cosmic microwave background. Energy density of space was confirmed in the Casimir effect of virtual particles. Both of these have been confirmed with scientific tests. We have actual, real evidence of these things are not imaginary. God has none of that. All of the properties of God, omniscience, omnibenevolence, omnipotence, perfectly good, mind outside of space-time, none of that has been demonstrated ever. None of that has evidence. And so when I'm comparing hypotheses, which one is a better explanation of the origin of the universe? One of them that has all of its parts have been demonstrated to be real in reality, and one of them, none of its parts have been demonstrated to be real in reality. One has evidence, one doesn't. It seems like the only rational conclusion is to go with the multiverse because it has evidence and the God doesn't. So why do you think that, even though you don't accept the multiverse, why do you think that we should reject it even though it seems to have more evidence?
The thing is, of course, that um, the evidence is all around us. Um, but are you willing to see it? It's all of reality, objective morality, it's creation, all these things scream God. It is just
Well, that's the part I'm asking about. How do they scream God? Because I think all of those things can be explained better by naturalism. I think all of those things are evidence of naturalism, and none of that is evidence of God. So how is that evidence of God? That's the question.
now, for instance, like objective morality is the same thing. It's like, um, where does that come from?
I think it's a law of physics.
So murdering, raping, and so forth, we refrain from that, and that's because of law of physics. Or is there something or someone behind that who put that in place in order for us to live?
Well, I'd say so. I agree that there is an objective morality. So there is a correct set of moral obligations, not really obligations, but, and I think that for it to be objective, objective means stance independent normative truths. It needs to be something that is not based on a mind, because if it's based on a mind, then it's subjective. It's contingent on subjective intuitions, perspectives, whatever. And so if morality is objective, and we both agree it is, then the better explanation for that is that it's a fundamental law in physics, because we normally agree laws of physics are objective: gravity, electromagnetism, strong, weak, force, etc. And so it seems like the better explanation of morality is it's a law of physics. I don't understand why a mind would be an explanation of an objective law at all. Like, it seems like if a mind created morality, then it's going to be subjective, not objective. And so even in the case of morality, a naturalistic explanation is going to be better than a theistic one, because a naturalistic explanation can give us a better explanation of an objective system of morals than a theistic one.
So you do the things you do because I still can't see that. I still don't know how you can come up with um, an objective moral without having someone putting that standard in place. Because, for instance, the evolutionary process doesn't give us that. As for instance, our and duties that we have, where do they come from?
Right. So, like, the evidence question is like, if there is an objective law of physics, an objective moral law of physics that affects people, then we would expect to see that this law would have impacts on societies over time. And we would expect to see that there would be a single pattern of change that would affect the different moral systems that we have across time. And as time progresses, we would expect us to get more and more moral. And we do see this pattern. It's called moral progress. We see over time the rate of immorality, or the things that we see as immoral, are changing in a very specific way. And that specific way is a pattern that we can make predictions based off of, to say that in the future, this is how it's going to be. And past that, it's going to continue across this pattern. If we see this pattern, that's very good evidence that there is this objective moral law of physics that is affecting our personalities in order to shift us in a particular moral direction. And we do see this. It's something we see. It's called moral progress. And so by following the patterns of moral progress across cultures and time, we can see the potential impact and direction that this law is having on us. And we can give an inference by describing this pattern with a principle. And that principle can then describe what this objective law is, just like for physics. If we see a consistent pattern in physics, we can then describe it with the principle, and that principle describes the law.
Doesn't account for the things that we do that go counter our own survival instincts.
That would be the law. So the law isn't based on survival instincts. The law was before life. So the law is a fundamental part of physics. And if the law is that, I think the objective moral principle is any involuntary imposition of will is wrong. I think that's what that principle describes what objective morality is. And that's independent of survival. It's not, it has nothing to do with survival. It's not based on evolution. And so the fact that we do
To me,
things
it's
against,
like,
go ahead.
no, like you keep on talking about laws, just like in creation there are certain laws and so forth, or in evolution, whatever laws, and now in morality there are laws. But you explain, or how do those laws come into being,
They're
without
uncreated.
without without a mind behind putting the place, right? Um, that's what I'm not getting.
Okay, so who created God's nature? How did God's nature come into being without having some mind design God's nature?
God is an eternal being,
Right. Exactly.
right?
That's
And
the
everything
answer.
derives from God.
Yes. So now take that, apply the exact same answer to naturalism and get rid of the mind. So we have there's a nature of reality. It's quantum fields, and those quantum fields are eternal. They're uncreated. Everything derives from these things. They don't have a beginning. And so just like you think God's nature wasn't created by a mind, it's just an
Mhm.
eternal thing. There can be nature's nature, the reality of the nature of reality, also doesn't need a creator. It can just be eternal for the exact same reasons.
Well, like you said, if you say, well, we'll take the mind out of that, what have we got left, right?
Um,
Then
Eternal,
there's
all
nothing.
powerful.
What's that?
Eternal and all powerful. So to use the properties of a God that I think would describe um, naturalism would be eternal and all powerful.
But
No
without
mind.
intelligence,
Yes.
without a mind,
Yep. Yep.
right? And so everything then is willy nilly. There
Mm,
isn't behind anything.
what do
How
you
do
mean?
these laws? Uh, how do these laws come into place? If there is an eternal something that you say without a mind,
Yep.
how do those intelligent laws come into place? How can non-intelligence create intelligence?
So can God lie?
No,
And the reason he can't lie is because it's against his nature, right?
right?
And did God choose that? Did he manually design his nature, or did his nature determine his consciousness?
Um, Say that again.
Did God choose his nature? Did God's consciousness exist
No,
and then he like designed his nature?
no, 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 no.
Right. So his nature was there like it's a thing that he didn't choose. It wasn't designed by a mind, but it has laws. It has laws that it's obeys. Like logic, it can't violate
Right.
logic, I imagine.
Okay. Hmm.
So there's this eternally existing thing that has laws and patterns that was not created by a mind, which is God's nature.
Right.
So we can have an eternally existing thing that has laws that is naturalism.
Say there is an intelligent being, a divine being, who is intelligent, who is ultimately good, um, creating and putting things in place for humanity or and all of creation to thrive.
Well, why is God good?
He just is.
Right. So there's this law that God is good, and
Well,
there isn't a
it's not a
mind that
law.
like
He is just
make.
he's a personal being who is ultimately good.
A law is just a pattern. So a law is saying that there's a pattern.
Who is essentially good.
So law just means a pattern. There's a pattern in reality. So if God has a pattern of he is good, that's we can just say that's a law just as a colloquial term. Doesn't mean it's like actually a law. But so God has this nature to him that he is good. And he didn't choose that nature. No mind made this way. That means that there are some things in the fundamental nature of reality which were not designed by a mind that are very patterned. There's a very clear pattern in God's nature. He is moral and not immoral. And he never makes mistakes. He doesn't violate the laws of logic. He has a very specific pattern that was not designed by a mind. Now that means that in reality, we can have a very specific pattern of laws, like the laws of physics, that have a pattern that are not designed by a mind, just like you can have a pattern in God's nature that are not designed by a mind. And both can be fundamental. So we can just skip the God and go straight to the laws of physics and say, these are the patterns. These are the fundamental unchanging patterns, not God's nature, not the morality, and not God's inability to lie. Those are also patterns, but I think those patterns are not the real ones. The real patterns are the nature of the quantum field, the energy density of space-time, the fine structure constant. These are the real fundamental constants of the essence of reality, not omniscience, omnibenevolence, omnipotence. These are not the patterns. These are not the fundamental patterns. Fine structure constant, this is the pattern.
So in other words, though, you believe in God.
Without the mind.
Right. But you believe in God nonetheless.
If you define God as an eternal, all-powerful thing that has no mind, sure.
It's just different than mine.
Sure, it has no mind. Yes. So I agree that there is a fundamental thing in reality. Yes. It just doesn't have a mind.
So your God is
quantum fields.
Mindless.
Yes.
And mine is personal.
Yes.
And intelligent. That's the difference.
Well, I'd say the main difference is mine has evidence. That would be my difference.
So does mine, right?
Like what?
I would say everything that I see in reality shows me that God exists. But of course, you deny that, and your atheist friends do deny that, and I affirm that, right? So what does it take, right? Now, I can't convince you that the God of the Bible and the God of Christianity exists.
Well, I don't care about that. So
I can't convince you of that.
Well, that doesn't matter. Whether you can convince me is irrelevant. What each of us personally believe does not matter. What matters is, can we objectively prove that this particular piece of evidence indicates one hypothesis over the other? And if we can, it doesn't matter what we personally believe. It doesn't matter what convinces us. We can know for a fact one of us is right, whether or not we accept it, if one has evidence and the other doesn't. And so in the case of naturalism, we have this. We have successful testable predictions. We can make predictions about reality, the age of the Earth, the redshift in the cosmic microwave background radiation, the ERVs. We have these things which you have to reject if you can reject. I don't care if doesn't matter if they convince you. I'm not interested in trying to convince you of atheism. What I'm interested in is trying to understand why you don't recognize that these things are clearly and unambiguously evidence of naturalism, and there is no clear and unambiguous evidence of theism. This is the part I'm missing. Because when we look at novel testable predictions of ERVs and the cosmic microwave background radiation and Guth's early universe inflation and virtual particles that we can demonstrate in the Casimir effect, these are clear, unambiguous evidence of definitely naturalism. And what do you think is the clear and unambiguous evidence of theism that isn't explained better by this naturalist explanation? Because all the things you listed, I think, are better explained by naturalism. But we also have these things that theism can't explain at all.
Right. And I can't, well, to me, it's like, okay, if your world is closed off to the supernatural, of course you're not going to believe that God or a God exists. Right?
I'm not closed off to the supernatural. If you had evidence, I'd be happy to accept the supernatural.
Well, yeah, to me, is the evidence is all around us. So the evidence is what I see. Reality is it it shows me that God does exist, and for you it doesn't, and that's
Well, no,
um,
I don't care what either of us personally believe. What I want to know is what
I,
objectively indicates a God,
I do like.
independent of opinion. So objectively, the cosmic microwave background radiation indicates the universe is 13.8 billion years. You don't get an interpretation. I don't get an interpretation. Our opinions don't matter. What we feel doesn't matter. This is an objective fact. So when I present evidence, I don't need to say, well, you just don't accept it. I don't care if you accept it. I can say, here's an objective fact. It's true regardless of who accepts it. But I don't say, you don't seem to provide any of that on the case of theism. You just keep saying, oh, well, you don't accept that. Like, I don't care if I accept it. Show me how it objectively indicates the hypothesis of a God more than the hypothesis of naturalism.
Well, to me, it's like as the Bible says that nature shows us that God indeed exists. Um, how the world came to be and is a different question. There are several interpretations how the world came to be, but I do believe that God is behind the entire process of it. Objective moral facts is because a divine being is behind it, because it um, so reality itself, the consistency of Christianity itself shows me that it is true. So all these things to me are evidences. You as well gave me a whole bunch of evidences why you believe that naturalism is true, and I can give you a whole bunch of evidence that I see that God's existence is true.
Right. But so when we take one of those examples, origin of the universe, and we say, you think this is evidence of God, I think this is evidence of
Mm.
naturalism. And we want to say, well, who's right? Um, my hypothesis makes successful predictions. It says the things that predict the origin of the universe are goose early universe inflation. We can observe that. That is a testable thing that we can scientifically go look at in the sky. Casimir effect, it's a scientific test we can do in a lab, vacuum states and metal plates. Um, that those are things that seem to indicate my hypothesis and that
But
we
it
can
doesn't deny
demonstrate.
the existence of God, though.
It does. So my hypothesis makes predictions, yours does not, which denies the existence of God. So like if I said, remember my squirrel example? If a squirrel knocked over a cup and I predict that there are squirrel droppings, and we then discover there are squirrel droppings, that's evidence of my hypothesis. The fact that you can say, oh, well, that doesn't disprove the spirit hypothesis, because the spirit could have infected the squirrel. It could have just gone into the squirrel and then made the squirrel do it. That's not evidence of yours. So saying that it doesn't disprove God does not in any way help your hypothesis here. The fact that I was able to predict these things in reality and I got them right means I get all the evidence, you get none of the evidence. So what you would need is you would need to say you can predict something about reality and get it right. But you haven't done that. All you've done is said you can take the things I've predicted and make them fit into your hypothesis, which isn't evidence. Like it's not evidence at all.
Okay, to me, it's like that goes both ways. Um, you can you explain things naturalistically, and
Well, I predict things. So I'm not explaining things, I'm predicting things we don't know yet, and I'm getting it right.
yeah, to me, it's like with the patterns and with the laws, um, you deny that there is an intelligent being behind all that, and I don't. Um, I see evidence. If you talk about patterns and you talk about laws, I see the evidence of a divine mind behind that.
Let me try to use a different analogy here. Let's say I have a hypothesis that there is no God and that the universe is governed by a law of physics of some kind, and that's it. And you have a hypothesis there is a God. and we both make predictions about, say, the lottery numbers. Say, if I'm right and the fundamental nature of reality, the theory of everything tells me the next lottery numbers are going to be these numbers, and you say you pray to God or whatever, and you think that the lottery numbers are a different number, and I get it right like 10 times in a row, 100 times in a row, every time, every lottery, I get it right. Who should you believe has a better basis of understanding reality? The one who gets it right every single time, or the one who says, "Well, I got it wrong, but I can make it fit. God may have wanted those numbers for some reason." Like which one is the better explanation? The one who gets it right before we know, or the one who tries to explain it after we know?
Like you go by patterns. Well, who set those patterns?
Right. So that's the question we're trying to ask. Is I think it's nobody, you think it's God, but
Mhm.
I can predict the patterns correctly. You cannot. Who should we believe?
But what are you predicting?
The, the, the future patterns we haven't seen yet.
Okay.
What, so does that make sense that if I have a model that can predict the future patterns and get it right, and the other model cannot do that, the model that can predict it and get it right is better?
I just the predictions are, I don't know what you're predicting. What patterns are you predicting? There is some order behind it.
Right. So we both agree that there's order, and we want to know what's causing that order.
That's
I
right.
think it's a
Yeah,
law of physics. You think it's God.
that's
And
right. So,
mine is able to correctly predict what those patterns are going to be. Yours does not do that.
but
So which should we believe?
why does that deny the existence of God?
So I say there's no God, and it's this law of physics is fundamental. And if it's this law of physics, I can predict the future, and I do predict the future. And you think it's God, and you can't predict the future. Which one is more rational?
But why, or why you predicting the future? Why does that deny God? Why can't God? Why isn't He behind the patterns that you're predicting?
Okay, so like if one person thinks, let's say there was this debate in science about what caused heat to cause things to rise. It was um, energy convection or phlogiston. Phlogiston was this hypothetical particle that was like released by fire to cause things to rise, and we want to know who's right and who's wrong. The one that predicted phlogiston predicted that there's this new particle. It's just too small. We can't see it, but it's causing all these things. And the one that predicted it was the expansion of particles, predicted that if it's the expansion of particles under these conditions, we'll get this result. They do the test, they get the result. Now, the phlogiston person can say, oh, no, that's still phlogiston. You haven't explained it's not phlogiston, but it's not, you shouldn't take them seriously because they have an unfalsifiable hypothesis. They don't have any evidence. They're just saying that, oh, well, all the data the other guys, all the progress the other guys make, mine can explain that, even though I'm not making any progress. And if these other guys are making all of the progress and they're like, yeah, we understand reality, we're going to make the progress, we're going to make the test, and they get it right. The fact that this other guy in the corner doing nothing is simply saying, well, oh, my hypothesis explains all that too. You shouldn't take him seriously. He's wrong because his hypothesis is unfalsifiable and it's making no predictions. The other guys are right. And they eliminate his hypothesis. His hypothesis is bad. We get rid of it. It's wrong. It's done because it doesn't make progress. So if my hypothesis of naturalism is the one making progress, it's right. And the other one is wrong. The God hypothesis is wrong because it's not making progress. The fact that you can say, oh, well, God could be explaining that makes it an unfalsifiable hypothesis. And so we reject it as wrong because any hypothesis can do that. Any hypothesis can be unfalsifiable. What makes us accept one is correct and all of the others is wrong is the ability to make progress, novel successful predictions.
Okay, yeah, I'm still with you don't dismiss, or those that the predictions don't you don't necessarily have to take God out of the picture. But to me, it's like, we can talk like this, and we can go back and forth, but where does it get us, right?
Well, none of the things in science have disproved leprechauns, right? We haven't disproved leprechauns. Does that mean that it's rational to believe in leprechauns?
No, leprechauns. That's leprechauns and unicorns. It's something totally different than God.
Wait. So just the scientific evidence we have of the Big Bang, ERVs, none of that disproves leprechauns. But it's not rational to believe in leprechauns. If somebody believes in leprechauns, they're being irrational because they don't have any evidence. You don't need to disprove something to make it irrational. It's irrational if it doesn't have any evidence. So all of the things I listed that are evidence of the naturalistic hypothesis don't disprove leprechauns, just like they don't disprove God, because you can't disprove anything in science anyway. But it's equally as irrational to believe in leprechauns as it is irrational to believe in God, because simply saying that God could explain all of these things we see is exactly the same as saying leprechauns could explain all these things we see. It's not evidence. It's not anything. So for the exact same reason that when you say all of the things I listed don't exclude God, the leprechaun believer could say the exact same thing and say all of the science you listed, well, that doesn't exclude leprechauns. Now, that's not evidence, or that doesn't make it rational to believe in either God or leprechaun. The fact that you can say those words does not make it rational. What you need is your own kind of evidence.
Yeah. Of course, there are no evidences for leprechauns, and there are evidences for God, but
Like what?
we're not accepting the evidence that God exists, right? As through church history, they have already the church fathers already said the um, there's the church is one of the miracles. The church, how long Christianity, what Christianity has gone through, what Christians have gone through, the Bible, all these things are good evidences and additional evidences to what we believe Christianity to be, and that God exists. But whatever I can say is won't you will not accept that as legitimate evidence.
Well, no, it's not that I won't accept it. It's that I can prove it doesn't work. Like saying that there's a round square. If I can prove what you're saying is false, then whether or not I accept it doesn't matter. So why do you think the fact that the church exists is evidence of God more than leprechauns?
The what the church has gone through for 2,000 years, but yeah, I'll be getting into all kinds of different topics, and what can I say? That to me is good evidence. The Bible is good evidence. Creation is good evidence. Like we talked about, objective morality is good evidence. All these evidences are cumulative and give me a good indication that indeed God exists.
I'm not seeing how, because for all of those, I explained how naturalism is a better explanation for all of those.
Yeah, so we can go back and forth that way. Yeah.
Well, I didn't hear the fourth part, so I went back and showed how naturalism was better, and you didn't explain how that was wrong.
What's wrong?
That naturalism better explains all of those things. How is it not the case that naturalism better explains all of those things?
Well, to me, is like well, we talked about that already. And when you talked about laws and talked about patterns and so forth, you dismiss a mind from that, right? So,
Yes.
and to me, it's like that's that's impossible to have an something intelligent, and coming from non-intelligence.
Can water come from non-water?
No.
Hydrogen and oxygen, neither one of those is water, but when you add them together, you get water, right?
Hmm.
So water, hydrogen and oxygen combined, can come from non-water, which is hydrogen and oxygen separated. So hydrogen and oxygen on their own are gases, and when you combine them, they become a liquid. And so this new thing called water can come from other things that are not water, hydrogen, oxygen. So intelligence and life can be emergent properties, and they can come from things that are non-intelligent and not alive, because of determined laws of physics, just like water can come from non-water because of determined laws of physics.
Hmm. Okay.
Did that make sense? Why intelligence can come from non-intelligence?
No. No.
Okay, so intelligence is a process of accessing data through on-off switches, and on-off switches are results of evolution. The patterns in particles connecting, and patterns in particles connecting is a result of chemistry, and the chemical bonds are a result of physics, and the physics is a result of quantum fields. And so from quantum fields that are not alive and they don't have brains, the quantum fields can create patterns in physics, and the patterns in physics can create chemical bonds in chemistry, and the chemical bonds in chemistry can create
Mhm.
biology, and biology can produce intelligence.
So
Just like,
the process, that's a leap, but the processes that you just mentioned, um,
yep,
are to me, uh, do not happen just randomly.
I agree. I think they're
That,
determined.
okay, determined by whom?
The laws of physics.
So, but who, again, who puts those law in place?
Well, that's again, that's like asking who created God. Nobody created those things. Those things are necessary beings. They are uncreated.
Mhm. Okay, well, that's where it stops then, right?
Right. And so the question is you claim there's an uncreated being who is a mind, which I claim there is an uncreated being who is a quantum field, but mine is able to tell us stuff about reality and get it correct. I don't think yours is.
Mhm. Okay.
Would you agree that if one hypothesis can accurately tell us things about reality, that it's a better hypothesis than one that can't?
And that, yeah, oh, sure. And what reality is that? Is that your reality or is it my reality?
Well, mine predicted ERVs, the cosmic microwave background radiation, the fossil record, the geological record, the chemical bonds we find in RNA on clay, corpuscles forming on clay. It predicted self-reproducing RNA molecules that we could find. It predicted all of the different kind of chemical bonds we see in forming acetane, whatever. Like, what do yours predict?
But for you, all these things that you predict are, uh, just happen without any mind behind it.
Right? That's the
And
hypothesis.
and my hypothesis doesn't. It says
Right.
all these things that you mention, there is a mind behind it.
Yes, I agree on that part, but mine was able to predict these things, yours was not. So Doesn't that make mine better? Because mine was able to predict them before we knew them. Yours could not predict them before we knew them. So mine's
To
better.
me, it's like still the naturalistic worldview produces things and predicts things through laws that have come into being through or have existed eternally.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right. And I say that the laws that are in place are set in place by a lawgiver, an intelligent being.
Right. That's the hypothesis. So like
Okay.
imagine if I said I have a magical 8-ball. You know what a magical 8-ball is? The thing that you shake and it has like a little dice
Right.
inside of it.
Right.
So say I have a magical 8-ball and I say this magical 8-ball is connected to the fundamental nature of reality and can tell me things about reality. And it was made by the magical leprechaun, Bob. And if I say this is the case and I shake it and I say, Bob, tell me what is the next greatest scientific discovery, and it tells me and it gets it right, is that a good reason to believe this hypothesis is correct and the other hypotheses are wrong?
Again, you're saying that you're asking for a prediction, and where does that prediction come from?
The magical 8-ball. So I shake a magical 8-ball and it gives me a message.
That's of course that's random, right? It could very well go the other way.
Well, no, so say it always gets it right. This magical 8-ball is always correct. Every time I shake it and ask it a question, it's right. Every time. Is this a good reason to believe that this 8-ball correctly describes reality and Christianity would be wrong?
No.
Why not?
Because that's because you know that this magical 8-ball or whatever gives you the right answer all the time, which is, of course, which can happen. It can't just get, because it's random.
No, it's not random. That's the point, is that if it's right every time, that's the opposite of random. So
yeah, but I mean, but it is a magical 8-ball who can't predict the future.
No, I don't. So this is called a hypothetical.
I know it's a hypothetical.
So hypothetically, say the magic 8-ball does every single time get the correct answer. Would it be rational to believe the magic 8-ball, even though, like, right, we don't understand how a magic 8-ball works? To us, it seems random. To us, it seems impossible. But if it gets it right every single time, should we believe the magic 8-ball?
Well, to play along with you, sure.
Right. So if there is some method, we don't understand the method, whatever it is, even if it's something this silly like a magic 8-ball, if it gets the answers right, whatever it says, we should believe it because it gets the answers right and the other ones don't. So if this is the only one that gets things right, no matter how silly it sounds, we should believe that thing because it's the only thing that gets that right that often. Right? Would you agree?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the magic 8-ball is science. Science is the one making the predictions and it's getting them right all the time. And it makes some very strange claims about quantum particle duality and entanglement, information traveling faster than light, and logic being crazy at quantum levels. It makes a lot of really weird claims. But if it gets it right every single time when it makes a prediction, we should probably believe this magic science thing. And that's what I'm doing. I'm saying this magic science thing.
Hypothetically, if that's were the case, yes, but it can't.
Isn't that what science does? Science is the magic 8-ball.
The thing is, of course, that somebody is behind it, right? And you're shaking that ball or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Somebody's behind it and guides it. Like science as well. Science is not just a thing that mankind just came up with and
Okay. Let's change the analogy a little bit. Let's say there's a magic 8-ball, and the magic 8-ball is governed by a law of a magic law. There's no minds, 0 minds governing this. There's a magic law with no mind governing this magic 8-ball, and it gets things right every single time we shake it. Should we believe that there is this magic law that governs everything if this 8-ball gets things right every single time?
Okay. Sure.
Right. So if we have this, there's a hypothesis, magic 8-ball governed by a non-mind, and if it gets things right every single time, that's a really good reason to believe that there is a law, not a mind, governing everything, because the method that it produces is very, very accurate. Now we have a method like this. It's called science. Science is a method like this magic 8-ball that thinks the fundamental nature of reality is a non-mind, it's a quantum field, and it accurately predicts everything we see, more accurate than anything else ever. And so isn't it rational to trust in this scientific method that says that there is a non-mind governing the universe, just like it would be rational to trust a magical 8-ball if it was governed by a non-mind law thingy?
Sure. Okay. I'll grant you that.
Okay, and that's what I think is the case. I think that when we look at science, most of the scientific hypotheses, abiogenesis, cosmic microwave background radiation, Big Bang, all of these things say nothing about a God. They say the fundamental nature of reality is a quantum field. That's what all of the physics says. There's no God in the physics departments. And they are able to make all of these fantastical predictions. Like the one of the examples used in quantum mechanics is that they were able to make a prediction that is so accurate that it would be able to measure the distance between San Francisco and Washington, D.C. with the error of magnitude less than a human hair. And they can predict that distance that accurately. And so we have this model that can make these fantastically accurate predictions about reality. And it says nothing about a God. It says quantum fields are the fundamental thing, and there's nothing more fundamental. And it gets things right more than anything else. I think we should believe that thing, and we should not believe the God hypothesis because it's not able to do that.
But somebody has to put the data into the science, right?
Well, someone has to read
In
the
order
data.
for you to produce that.
Well, we read the data. The data is there. It's just in reality. We just read it. So just like if you shake a magic 8-ball, we have to read the thing it says on the screen. We don't input the thing it says on the screen. We read it. And so in science, we read the data. We don't input it. We don't write it. We read it.
Yeah, I okay, that's your opinion, and I'll grant you that. But I just don't buy it. That's all. I believe that but not that I poo-poo science. No, not at all.
All right. Did you have any other questions or comments you wanted to add? Anything else you wanted to talk about?
No.
All right.
I did not predict that we would talk about science so much, but that's okay.
All right. If anybody in the audience has any questions, put them in the chat. I'll give them a few minutes. Don't see anything yet. Well, we've been going for about an hour and a half. It was a great conversation. Really appreciate you coming on. Do you want to give any links or references where people can find out more about your work?
No, that's fine. That's fine. It was a good conversation, and like I said, I generally don't debate atheists. I have I do have conversations with them, and open conversations, and I think this was a good conversation. I appreciate your knowledge and science. That's more than you're more scientific than I am. I am a theologian by trade, not a scientist, and so I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate your candor, and but I do hope that you'll look into Christianity. And it's one thing that, of course, that whatever I say and the arguments that we have will not convince an atheist. That's not our job to do. God does convince, and we rely on Him only. So that is far more important than what I had to say. I look on your chat list, and people are kind of like, they weren't too impressed with what I had to say, which is fine. But so that's all I have to say.
Cool. We did get several questions in, if you don't mind. Sebi asked, who is the most intelligent writer you've ever read?
Most intelligent writer? That's probably Karl Barth, the Swiss theologian.
Is he still alive?
Nope.
Not invite him on, unfortunately.
What do you mean?
Oh, I would. Normally, if you listed an author who was alive, I'd invite him on to have a conversation with him. So
no, I wish.
It'd be great evidence of God if I could get him on, though.
Yeah, no, I wish he was, but he's a theologian.
All right. Jeff asks, what evidence would Bill need to change his mind?
I don't. I'm never going to change my mind. The thing is that God has convinced me that He exists, and nothing can change my mind. I'm living firmly in that reality, and everything that I see, everything that I do, is dictated by that conviction.
Gotcha. And Jeff also asks, how does Bill recommend we look into Christianity?
The best way, of course, is to read Scripture, to read the Bible. If you want to know more about Christianity, go right to the source.
Gotcha. That is it for the questions. Thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Hey, you too.